A lot of people think Chinese cars are rubbish, but MG reckons its new ZS is ready to take on the best from the likes of Ford, Renault and Mazda in a tightly fought class.
MG is back, sort of. While the manufacturer is keen to emphasise heritage dating to 1924, this is not the same Morris garages which built its brand on compact British sports cars. Instead, MG now builds cheap and cheerful compact models in China. The ZS is its answer to compact SUVs, such as the Mazda CX-3. There's more than a little Mazda to the MG's front-end styling. Have a look at those daytime running lights and the way that the headlights meet the grille. But if you were to take inspiration from a rival machine, you could do a lot worse than the CX-3, one of the most popular cars in its class. Like much of the Ford model range, the EcoSport is a slow seller in Australia. Our test example is a recently updated 2018 model, which happens to have a spare wheel in the back. If you order one of these today, you won't get one of those. The fourth car in our group is the Renault Captur. The best-selling car in its class in Europe brings a touch of flair to the Quartet. You get a sense that MG borrowed elements from all of these cars. Just check out that upswept window line on the side of the machines. There's a fair chance MG engineers had a peek under the bonnet of the EcoSport when designing the ZS. Priced from just over 25 grand drive away, the EcoSport features a magic little 1-litre 3-cylinder turbo engine, one which uses 6.7 litres per 100 k's of fuel to make 92 kilowatts of power and 170 newton meters of torque. Like all of the cars in this group, it employs a 6-speed automatic transmission to drive the front wheels. Reasonably well equipped for the money, the Ford disappointingly misses out on features such as autonomous emergency braking or blind spot assistance. Then again, those features aren't easy to find in cars of this class.
The EcoSport, or sometimes EcoSport, has a charming little engine, a 1-litre 3-cylinder turbo motor that has a great sound to it. When you give it a little bit, it purrs away quite pleasingly. I do like a 3-cylinder engine, and the Ford arguably has one of the best on the road. It really is quite nice. There's a decent amount of torque to the Ford and has a fine partner in a 6-speed automatic transmission that replaces a dual clutch unit that Ford had been using in the past. That dual clutch was one of the worst transmissions on record, not only for how it performed day to day, but also for how it performed in the long run. Ford had a lot of problems with those, but you don't need to worry about this one. This is a conventional torque converter automatic, not a dual clutch transmission. So if you've been bitten by Ford's power shift dual clutch, don't really need to worry too much about this. On the open road, the Ford handles quite well. There's great response from its steering and brakes. It feels like a really well sorted little car. It rides over bumps reasonably well and retains its composure when you do press on a little bit. It's a very fine car indeed. The EcoSport impresses in the cabin. It's home to a large touchscreen with Apple CarPlay, 2 easily accessed USB points, and there's plenty of space in the back seat. But the Ford loses points back here, where it has a side hinge tailgate that's quite awkward, home to a large spare tyre that will soon be deleted from the model. As you can see, there's a decent amount of room in the boot.
If safety is your number one priority, the CX-3 is a great place to start. Equipped with autonomous emergency braking as standard, Mazda calls it Smart City Brake Support, the CX-3 also brings blind spot monitoring to keep you out of trouble. But you pay for the privilege. Currently on sale with a 2-litre 4-cylinder petrol engine and 6-speed auto for $26,990 drive away, the Mazda is the most expensive model here, but it is the most powerful.
The Mazda CX-3 remains enduringly popular in this segment, and it's not hard to see why. It's a beautiful car, both inside and out. It's very handsome to look at, and it also drives really well. Now the CX-3 bucks the trend for turbocharging, using a 2-litre 4-cylinder engine without a blower. So that means that the engine does have to work a little bit harder than some of its rivals. It can be a bit noisier when you're up it. It doesn't have a turbo sort of muffling some of those sound outputs. That said, it's not really anything to complain about. There's plenty of punch on offer from the engine, and it has a great partner in its 6-speed automatic transmission, of course driving the front wheels. Unlike some of its rivals, the CX-3 is also available with a turbo diesel engine. That is a handy option and not one that you're going to find in most of its competitors. On the whole, the CX-3 is great to drive. It's got sharp steering, very well composed car, though there is a little more road noise than you might expect from this sort of model. The CX-3 we're driving right now is imminently due to be replaced. There will be a revised version just around the corner, which we expect to see some little tweaks to keep it on top of its game, though by no means are they going to be wholesale changes. Talking very minor tweaks and specification changes just to keep buyers' interests. Based on the Mazda 2, the CX-3 brings some big car touches to the segment, including this padded dashboard strip with contrasting stitching and a remote control arrangement for its touchscreen, though it doesn't have Apple CarPlay. There are some interesting features in here, including these lovely round air vents and faux carbon fibre, which we might see on another car, though it loses points for having the least rear seat space of the group, particularly in terms of headroom, and For having a cargo area that is the smallest of the group by some margin. You can see it does struggle somewhat for space, though again, there is a nice little hidey hole under the floor.
If the Mazda is the safest one here, the Renault probably ranks last in that regard. It doesn't even have side airbags for the back seat. Currently priced from $25,590 drive away, the Captur does bring a punchy 1.2 litre 4-cylinder turbo engine that brings 88 kilowatts of power and 190 newton meters of torque.
So the Captur is the only car in this group with a 4-cylinder turbo engine, and it's the only car with a dual clutch automatic transmission. Now on paper that should make for a great combination, but in reality it doesn't always work quite the way you'd hope. The transmission can be a bit lurchy and jerky at low speeds, and the engine can need a little bit of time to deliver its best, though it is certainly a smooth, quiet performer with an aesthetic edge at least over the Mazda and even the Ford as well. It's a very, very smooth unit. Out on the road, the Renault feels quite sporty. It's got great reactions to driver input, and it really soaks up imperfections quite well. It has a real composure to it that feels really unflappable on the road. When you tip into a corner, you know, it just goes where you point it. Yeah, the Renault feels planted and composed. It really is not too bad a pick for drivers. Based on the Clio, which is one of the sharper cars in the light car class as well, the Captur is one of the favourites in this group in terms of driving dynamics. It really is not too bad. And when you come bowling up to a corner in the Captur on the brakes and you turn in, there's very little roll from it. It's just a really great response from the steering as the car just hooks through the corner and does what you want it to. It feels really well sorted. It's an impressive little car, the Captur, save for that transmission. I'm not a great fan of the driveline. I think there's certainly some work that could be done to improve some of its behaviour. The Renault has an interesting cabin, home to some funky details. You've got these zip-off washable seat covers, which you can use just in case that you make a bit of a mess throughout the cabin. There's funky elastic-based seat storage in the back. And up here, you're let down by an infotainment system that misses out on Apple CarPlay and requires you to plug your phone in right at the top of the screen whenever you want to use it. I think that looks a bit dorky. Around the back, you've got a conventional tailgate that offers a reasonable amount of room, but then if you need some more storage space, you can remove an extra floor and find that there's actually quite a bit more storage there for you to access.
Priced in the middle of the road at $25,990 drive away, the MG is the biggest car here and the only one with a 7-year unlimited kilometre warranty. The others offer 5-year guarantees. Like the Renault and Ford, the MG misses out on autonomous braking. Though it has airbags in the back, ANCAP hit the MG with a 4-star safety rating for less than ideal crash performance. Taking a page from Renault's book, the ZS features a similar 1-litre 3-cylinder turbo engine, one which uses the same 6.7 litres per 100 k's as the Ford to make slightly lower outputs, 82 kilowatts and 160 newton meters.
So the MG looks good in the car park, but how does it perform on the road? Well, that engine is a little bit strained. It goes okay, it's got a bit of punch, but you do hear some funky noises coming from under the bonnet. It sounds like it's something to do with the air conditioning system. Don't hear it all the time, but every now and then there's just a persistent hiss that you're just not expecting. You sort of hear that and go, what's going on? I'm not sure about that. I certainly aren't. There it is now. Yeah, don't get it. It's a sound that I'm not accustomed to hearing in new cars, and one that has me a little bit perplexed. Other than that, how is it? Well, the MG has fairly softly sprung suspension, which means there's quite a bit of roll when you tip into a corner and quite a bit of pitch when you're using the brakes. So if you brake and turn at the same time like that, it feels a little bit wallowy and it doesn't really control its motions the way that you want it to. When it's upset by a bump or a bit of sharp driving, the MG takes a moment to settle rather than just getting along with it the way that most cars do. It doesn't feel dynamically resolved in the same way that the Renault or the Ford or the Mazda do. There's definitely room for improvement there. Other than that though, it's not too bad. I do have a problem with the lack of reach adjustment for the steering wheel. I think that is a bit of a flaw. The automatic transmission and the turbo engine can be a bit doughy. If you do need a lot of punch from the car, it doesn't always deliver what you want. So I'm going to come out of an intersection here and give it 100% throttle. And you can feel it's taking its time. Now it's doing 50. So that was a good few seconds before it was really doing what you want it to do. It's not quite there. It's not awful to drive, but it really isn't as polished as the best in class. The MG makes a strong first impression, featuring faux leather with white stitching and a panoramic sunroof that you won't find on some of its rivals. Now, even if you've never driven one of its cars before, the MG feels instantly familiar because it lifts details from some of its key rivals. These air vents are straight out of the Mazda catalogue, and this steering wheel feels very, very Volkswagen with its flat bottom and easily grasped controls. That said, Volkswagen would offer reach adjustment, which isn't available in the MG. The brand is trying though. You've got a decent sized touchscreen, home to a reversing camera and Apple CarPlay, though to access Apple CarPlay, the USB point is hidden up under the dashboard. Is a bit awkward to grasp. There's plenty of space in the back, and when you open the boot, it reveals quite a solid amount of storage for a car this size.
MG's compact SUV is a reasonably convincing machine. It's the best Chinese car I've ever driven. But a lack of refinement, dynamic polish, and a question mark over safety give the model room to improve. There's a lot to like about the Renault. I'm a fan of its design, engine, and road holding, but a dated infotainment system and compromised safety hurt its chances. Similarly, the Mazda's strong safety features are offset by a noisy engine, lack of CarPlay, and tight space in the back. Ford's machine is an all-rounder. It has a good amount of space, the best engine, and the strongest infotainment system here. If you can live without autonomous braking, the EcoSport is the pick of this bunch.